everybody, Robbie here, and welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. The guest in this episode is Myles Downey. Myles' new book, The Sessions, marks a transition, a metamorphosis in his influential body of work. And that becomes the theme of this, his third appearance on the show. What happens when it is no longer sustainable to remain what you've been? What is it like to have an idea, like Myles did with The Sessions more than 30 years ago, and not be able to let it go? And for Padraig, who's the protagonist of The Sessions, what is it like for someone to really step into their own shoes, becoming a leader, becoming oneself as a leader? That is just the start, though, in a wide-ranging conversation that Myles and I have about his work, his new book, and what he has coming up next as part of what has already been an incredibly influential and impactful career, which started working closely with Sir John Whitmore in the early days of coaching in the UK, passed through the School of Coaching, his best-selling book, Effective Modern Coaching, and his powerful work on genius, which culminated in the book, Enabling Genius. In particular, in this episode, we talk about whether it is our duty and responsibility to express ourselves, which is an idea that came up in one of his previous appearances on the show. We talk about poetry, prose, fiction, and non-fiction, and Myles' relationship to reading and writing, and of course, we get into what all that has to do with coaching. We talk about Myles' passion for human nature, which is impossible to ignore when he talks about that, to me at least, about human nature, creativity, and how human beings should be more of themselves, not less of themselves. We talk about the close relationship between genius and being seen as mad, and why some leaders and CEOs see genius as dangerous. And I get Myles to get into one of the most powerful coaching exercises he did with me when he was my coach, which you can then use for yourself or with your clients. And at the end, Myles tells a moving story about the influence of his wife Jo on The Sessions and his wider work. And he gives a tantalizing trailer for what might be his next book, The Inner Game of Leadership, what it takes to express oneself configured around the notion of leadership. Before we get into the show, which I'm excited to share with you, I got some big news. Some of you will know this already, if you're a member of the Coach's Journey community or a supporter of the podcast. But I've decided that, and this wasn't a conversation, a decision that came easily, I've decided that I'll be wrapping up the Coach's Journey podcast in 2026. So we'll have the final episode of the show in the autumn sometime. The exact details, I'll be back on the podcast feed with in a little more detail sometime soon. But it's been a big reflection for me over the last year or so, as I've been rumbling with a new phase of my work, new focuses for my work. I wanted to share that with you because you're here listening to the podcast, and that's what has made all of this rewarding and meaningful at all. So thanks so much for being here with me. There's lots of changes afoot for me and my work with coaches. If you want to be on top of that, the best place to be is the Coach's Journey mailing list. You can sign up for that at thecoachesjourney.com. The Coach's Journey community is also coming to an end this year. The last ever Coach's Journey community call will be on the 23rd of June. You can join for just £20. So if you're curious about that and want to experience group coaching with me, my own unique way, learnt from masters, but also learnt from many years of experience, come and join me for that. Give the Coach's Journey community, which has been my group coaching program for coaches for a number of years, a great send-off on the 23rd of June. You can find out more about that at thecoachesjourney.com/community. Like I said, I'll be back with a bit more about how we're going to close the show over the next few months. Don't worry, we've got some great content and ideas up our sleeves. I'll be back on the podcast feed sometime, probably next month, to talk about that. But I wanted to let you know about it right now. That's enough from me on that, though, because what many of you will be here for is a chance to hear me and Myles in conversation. I had a wonderful time speaking to him, getting into these ideas about creativity, about what it means to have an impact on the world, and much, much more. So without further ado, here's my conversation with the fantastic Myles Downey. Myles, welcome back to the Coach's Journey podcast.
It's great to be here again.
Yeah. So I was looking it up to surprise us about how long we've known each other. The first one came out in late 2021.
Wow.
So that's 4.5 years. And the second one came out almost 2 years ago.
Gosh.
So that shows that time passes.
Yeah.
And it also puts, when I think about the arc of this show, it puts our conversation sort of nearer the start of it than I thought.
Right. Yeah.
But I really, I think I said this last time on the second one. I still do remember the energy of that first call, and the privilege of getting to connect with you. And I still think of that as one of the, one of the great, one of my favorite things about this this show over what is it, probably nearly 7 years now, is that we've ended up connecting. And there's been lots of things that have come
Well, you
from
do
that,
a great job.
Thank you. Well, and listeners can decide if that's still true. 7 years in, as we get into this. The other thing I wanted to say is, way back in that first interview in 2021, you said the next book will be The Enabling Manager, and the one after that will be The Sessions. And you have delivered on that promise. And I wanted to say congratulations on that, because you're not like some people have been on this show, talked about books they were going to write, and those books are not out.
Right.
And I know how much, maybe we'll get into that with this book, but I know how much resistance and struggle getting a book, birthing a book can be. And so, it's not nothing that both those books are out. Plus, as we spoke about last time, another edition of Effective Modern Coaching.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, I'm looking forward to talking about The Sessions today, which is where we're going to start in our call in a minute, because it's something a little different. But yeah, well done.
It is. Thank you. That's appreciated. Yeah.
Maybe, those two books are out since the first time you were on the show. Before that, there were 2, 3 more, depending on whether you count the different editions as separate books or not. Where does The Sessions for you fit in that growing body of work?
It almost, wow. I never thought I was going to say this. It almost marks a transition. And I just forgot to be. I first started writing The Sessions in, I think it was 1995. I was running a program somewhere in the UK, in Oxfordshire or something. And I stayed on for an extra day in order to start writing. It was 1995. And the idea was that rather than write a book about coaching, which was instructional and do this and do that, and here's the model, it would portray conversations between people, and people would then infer from those conversations what good coaching was, and that seemed like a great idea, but it didn't kind of work. And it took me a long time to understand that there needed to be a story, and there needed to be a backdrop, and there needed to be drama and whatever else. So and then I wrote Enabling Genius in, I think, 2014. And the idea became, I had a client at the time who had started doing things culturally different from the way people did it in that organization. He was in a very big American banking organization. And so he started, literally, I mean, it seems odd in these days to be talking about what he was doing, but he would trust his team to get on with things rather than micromanage. He would set parameters rather than specific, objectives and standards. And if people made mistakes, he'd talk about it and he'd get them to do it again. So he just came with it. And he came to me when we met. He said, people around here think I'm mad, he said. And I said, you laughed. And he said, yeah, but they don't know how mad I really am. And that was the invitation for us to have some great coaching conversations. So genius and being mad, I mean, you have to be careful about mental health issues and being overly, and the sensitivities around those, quite rightly. But it was like, what happens when you let that stuff loose? So it marks a transition because I'm seen so much as a coach and writing about coaching. And here is this other book that's about somebody stepping into their own shoes as a leader, becoming a leader, and how difficult that is to become oneself as a leader, and to trust that. And then, of course, there's the drama that a novel brings to the whole thing. So yeah, it's a transition. It's a shift into a space around much more about self-expression, much more about kind of operating in the leadership space, if you like.
Yeah. When I was listening back to the first time you were on the show, I think, like I say, I think it was 2021, you said this thing, or we drew out this idea that it might be our duty and responsibility as a human to express ourselves.
Wow.
And something about what you just said there, like, really echoed that. I mean, I guess on two levels. I can see that on two levels in this conversation. One is, in a way, that's what your client was saying, and what the character in the book is happening for him. But also, the sessions feels like that for you. You know, you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, very much. I'm nervous about the words duty and responsibility because I know intimately from my own work and whatever else and the barriers that I've bumped into that sometimes that to lay that on people's shoulders if you're suffering from some kind of a mental health condition, depression or something, or chronic lack of self-belief, that's a hard thing to put in front of people. So with more, we would, and I'm sure we meant it with more compassion, knowing how we talk. But yeah, I mean, I don't hope this doesn't sound kind of pompous or self-aggrandizing, but I've really set that as my agenda. You know, I play tennis and I play well. I play for the county veterans team, and I'm only getting better, despite my advanced years. And the point about it is that I got this human body thing. I didn't get cricket or grasshopper. I got this. So let's use it to the best of my abilities. How can I learn to play the best tennis? How can I, in the book, there are little sketches in the sessions of the pubs where the different things take place. And I'm not an artist, but I drew those things and I painted those things. And
Miles, I beg to differ. I think one of the reasons why it can feel like such a heavy burden to put on somebody that it is their duty and responsibility to express themselves is everyone in a country like this, or a country like the one you grew up in, has been told since they were little that they are not an artist. And Miles, it's just not true. You can't say that anymore. You've already written 5 books, but now you've got maybe some part of you could justifiably say, are they really art? You know, or are they more like science? Are they more like prose and poetry? But here we've got fiction with illustrations done by you. I think at this stage, you know, no one can deny that those are art.
Right. Okay. And in to be true to my own thesis, and principles, yes, and the point about it is, I think more than anything, is, you know, somebody asked me why I wrote the book, The Sessions, and it's like I couldn't not. You know, once I'd had the idea, the only reason for writing the book was to write the book, and I've been working over the last 18 months with a very good clinical psychologist. I got to a place of near burnout about 18 months ago, and he helped me through that. And the learning has been profound, and you know, the work with him has allowed me to kind of step into my shoes more fully, and own some of that stuff. But it's I mean, it's been fun. It's joy. His point, the psychologist's point, was, Myles, write the book and put it out in the world, and whether the world likes it or not is none of your business.
Yeah.
I
like him.
All right. That's good. Yeah, that frees you up.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think I kind of said some of this, but that idea of being a duty and responsibility to express ourselves, you know, I think that probably looks really different at different stages in life and different situations we're in. But I think you're right. I think for most of us, for the people who know that it's now their duty or responsibility to express themselves, it's because they've had the idea, their equivalent of the sessions. And at that stage, it is your duty to do it. I mean, a duty in a different way to how we mean it when you're, you know, a duty as a mother or a duty as a son or whatever it might be. It's a higher duty than that. But it is this sense of like, yeah, look, there's this art, there's this idea here trying to move through you. And yeah, it's quite a decision to refuse that and turn it down.
Yeah, we had a coaching session this morning with a lovely guy. He's a senior player in a well-known management consultancy, and he's moving on, and he's learned his craft as a consultant and kind of, you know, accepted the strictures of working in that trade for a number of years, and he's realized that that essentially, in his essence, he is an entrepreneur. And now that he's worked that out, he has no choice but to go out, and he's worried because there's a part of him that chose that career in order to provide for family and to, all of those good things, and repay his parents' investment in him, all the good, good conservative stuff. And then this dawning realization, and you can see when he starts talking about it, he just becomes animated and excited, and he has no choice.
Yeah. Look, let's talk a bit about the book so that people can kind of get into it. And so to do that, I think we need to do first. This is a funny thing that I love. You're going to need to, for listeners, and you can do it, describe how to say the crucial Irish names that are in this book. Because I happen to be very interested. I got interested as I can't remember who it would have been. I saw one once as a child, and then I got very interested in these names that I'd heard, but had no idea how they were spelt because they were Irish names. And so, now obviously I feel differently, and it was fun. One of my 5-year-old's best friends at school is called Clodagh by chance, and so there's a Clodagh character in the book.
There's a Clodagh, yeah.
But so the main character, how would you say his name?
Padraig.
Padraig.
We don't actually know what his surname is, by the way. So his name is Padraig.
So the reason I'm laboring this is that when you read this book, you're gonna, if you're an English speaker or probably a non-native English speaker from another country, you're going to read that as Padraig.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
and I thought it was interesting that in one of his team, they decided to call him Pat, which I thought I thought that was quite interesting because that made me think, okay, maybe people in Dublin also get pronunciations wrong.
Yeah, and I come from a kind of a more rather than less upper class kind of as part of Dublin society, and kind of things Irish, when I was growing up, were kind of frowned upon. Really, we didn't listen to Irish music, or we shunned Irish culture, and to our great loss of richness and whatever else. I mean, it ultimately seeps through from deep inside, and you start paying attention to it a bit more. But there's one of the funny little thing, I thought was funny writing was when the guys in the sales team call him Pat. And so, why do you call me Pat? So, well, Padraig's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? And it's like, well, yes, it is. It's awful. My younger brother, whom I love dearly, said, why did you call him Padraig? It's a horrible name. It's true. but it's kind of like, it was fun to play with these things, and to there's a guy later on, an American, and his name is Perry Vincent. And it's deliberately put that way because it's dissonant. It should be Vincent Perry. That sounds easier off the tongue. But no, it's Perry Vincent because he's a bastard. So it was constant learning as I wrote about all kinds of things about storytelling and language and being Irish.
Right, because it's a very different type of writing, as we've been talking about. I know about you, but I'm guessing there are reasons you decided to set it in Dublin, and we'll get to that. By the way, as an aside, one of the reasons I've become I was always kind of interested in Ireland, but one of the reasons I've become more interested in it in the last few years is this sense that Ireland wasn't invaded by the Romans. And so Ireland has 1,000, 2,000, 1,500 years more without being part of an empire than England does.
Yeah.
And I love the idea. I've only been to Ireland a couple of only once actually, but I hope in the second half of my life I get to explore it a lot, because it might give me a sense of what is this land that I was born in. What would it have been like if it hadn't become part of an empire so much sooner? Give us set up the book for us, because we're going to play with it a little, and I've got some questions I want to ask and that kind of thing. But yes, set up the book for people to entice them in.
Well, I mean, it starts with our good friend Padraig, standing in the middle of a bridge, a footbridge, a famous footbridge, the Halfpenny Bridge in the middle of Dublin, and a little event occurs, and it's 3 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. He walks down across the bridge and down the other side of the Liffey, and ends up in a pub. I mean, quite a well-known pub. And so it's situated in Dublin in 1987. That gave me more license because I could bend facts and and misremember and misrecall stuff that nobody could prove or disprove. I mean, I did some research, but a lot of it I did when I was 25. And so a different time, it kind of has intended to have a little bit of kind of a more magical feel to it. And he enters this pub and orders a pint of Guinness, and he ends up in conversation through a ridiculous device with the only other fellow in the bar who's wearing a suit, who's older and wiser and essentially becomes his mentor and guide. But they get into a conversation about a problem that Padraig is having within his business. It's about to be essentially its soul torn out of it. And the guy listens and understands and then says, so what are you going to do about it? And Padraig was not expecting that, at 4:00 after a pint and a half of Guinness. So they go on a kind of a Elysian journey through about half a dozen Irish pubs. And as he gets permission to rescue the business and turn it round. But in order to do that kind of hero's journey stuff, he kind of rejects the idea and says, couldn't be bothered, too stressful. And then realizes he has a duty and responsibility. And that is centered in him finding within his own resources the leader that he can be, the leader that he can become, and learning to express that in as uninhibited a fashion as he can. And I think the joy for me was that it goes beyond kind of competencies and right ways of doing things, and because it takes you then into things like kindness and generosity and trust. So there's another layer of stuff that goes on in the book, apart from drinking Guinness.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I should say, well, I not should say, but I want to say, Myles, it's a really enjoyable read. So I think there's because we kind of hinted at it, potentially a quite different set of skills in this. Maybe that's what you discovered when you first tried to write it in 1995. And you've done it really well. Like, it was just a totally enjoyable read. And of course, what I can't know is what will people who don't know your work take from it, which I'm fascinated by, because I could feel as a reader of some of your other books, as someone who's been on the receiving end of your coaching and who's interviewed you twice, I could feel you and your philosophies about that and about people and about genius in there, sometimes pretty explicitly and sometimes implicitly. But what I can say for everybody listening is, if you are curious about it from our conversation now, it's a really enjoyable read. One of the things that got me curious about, you've just mentioned Ulysses, you've mentioned the hero's journey, Eliot and Yeats get mentioned and maybe quoted in the book. It got me curious about, how do you relate to novels and literature? Like, what part and place do they have in your life as a human?
My family was quite intellectual, and I used to think that some of them were quite smart, and I kind of felt less intellectual and less smart, and probably took me a while to work out that was not true. So I kind of took to reading later than some of the others, but did read a lot. And always wrote. So, in my 20s and stuff, I was always writing poetry, some of which I still have, and at least one of the poems actually works. So I've always enjoyed that part of things. But then as life got busier and I spent more time kind of staring at a screen and kind of the end of the pandemic and the last few years, I'd stopped reading because I realized that I got taken away. So if I was on holidays and reading, I wasn't present with Jo, my wife, or Vicky and her tribe, and that kind of like, I don't like that. I don't like being lost in another world. I spend enough time being involved in my clients' worlds and whatever else. I don't. So I stopped reading, and I've only started again. I've always had poetry with me, always. Heaney, Yeats, primarily, and from motivation and fun and distraction. But I've only started reading again recently, and I've deliberately tried to focus on the Irish bit. So Colm Tóibín is currently one of our best writers, fantastic to read. So because writing has become more central in my life, and will become more central in my life over the next few years, I'm actually disciplining myself to read, but I'm making it shorter and not kind of reading a book in 2 days, because it's bad for my health.
Yeah, it's kind of real choice about, and especially in this age when almost every book that's been published in the last 100 years is accessible within seconds to us.
Yeah,
it's kind of even more important, isn't it, to make these choices? And I like the sense from you that, because I imagine some people will be really reading for that reason that you stopped reading, i.e. to escape, to be in a different world. And some of the time that's certainly how I use it. It's interesting that you've got poetry all around you. It makes me think of what you just said before about the sessions and how it feels. I feel like I learned this kind of embarrassingly late in life. I can't remember, like 5 years ago. And it was actually a fantasy novel that taught me this, would you believe it? But I just really grounded myself and got what a difference poetry can be to prose. And I think that then, and I'll say what I think about that in a sec, that then gives us also, it's a good analogy for how different fiction can be to nonfiction. The idea that I kind of finally got was that sometimes you can describe a concept or a state or something in a, I don't know, 5-stanza poem with a completeness that you couldn't describe in an 80,000 word novel.
Yeah, this is it.
Or an 80,000 word essay. But something, and it's amazing. It's also why working with metaphor in coaching can be so powerful, because we can get to like the full body of something without having to rationally describe it. But I'm guessing, and again, we're guessing a little bit because, well, I don't know, maybe you've had feedback from people who have read the sessions that don't know your work, or maybe not yet because it's quite new. But I'm guessing that there'll be some ways in which the sessions can give people a completeness, perhaps even a subconscious completeness of some of the things that you've written about elsewhere, that would take much longer if they were to read Effective Modern Coaching or Enabling Genius.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And there's something else going on behind this, which all of what we've been talking about, which I really want to bring to anybody who's listening, and thank you for listening, attention. There's a danger in kind of being slightly pompous or pretentious here, but I have such a profound belief in the abilities of the human being, that's a part of what kind of keeps me going and focused. You see, so I know something about what Galway called self 2. So he made a distinction between self 1 and self 2. Tim Galway, the author of The Inner Game of Tennis. Self 1 being the part of you that comes out of should, must, and have to. That's about duty bound. That's restricted and compliant. And then self 2 is the human being let loose, and with all its skills and abilities. So the state of flow is kind of synonymous and with Galway self 2, a very similar kind of experience. And when you're in flow, stuff happens. So I play competitive tennis because I can get into a state of flow very often doing that. So all my writing is actually I remember one of the last times I hit with Tim Galway. We were a beautiful day at the Queen's Club in London playing on grass. I mean, just gorgeous. And we hit some balls, and then Tim came up to it and he said, let's practice focusing. I go, what? What? Let's practice focusing. So, wow. So he introduced me to a little drill he had that was about focusing your attention. It was wild. And we both were hitting the ball fabulously well. So writing poetry is absolutely a flow activity. I'm able to put a certain part of my brain to decommission it and let my hand get on with writing. And I had this extraordinary moment. You mentioned Clodagh Byrne in the character in the book, she's an American who comes into Dublin. She does succession planning and assessment of people and whatever else. And she's second generation Irish. And she gets off the plane and she's trying to describe that feeling of when you get off a plane after a flight, it's particularly a long distance flight, and you've been cooped up in that cigar-like cylinder for a number of hours, and you've probably slept a bit and you're a bit dopey, and an airport's a strange place anyway. And she's trying to find the word to describe it. And the word comes to her, hibernation. And I'm writing this. I did not choose that word hibernation. It got typed out on the screen in front of me, right? So and I'm kind of saying, God, that's interesting. Why did I write that? And my hands keep writing. And what they say was that, of course, she said, that was what the Romans called Ireland, Hibernia. It's like, so I have this twist in the language and the, and in the structure of this little opening paragraph to that particular chapter. It's like, where did that come from? And it's just, and that happened all through the book. I mean, that thing you mentioned earlier about the guy calling him Pat or Porrig and saying, why do you do that? That wasn't planned. I mean, it really wasn't planned. And all the bits in the book that make me happy, it's like, yeah, I did well there. It's like my conscious mind was well, my consciousness was there, obviously, but that, that self-assessing mind was gone. And I just wrote. And so what I try and do as much as I can in life, whether I'm cooking supper for me and Joe or if guests or whatever, or trying to do a painting or playing tennis or writing or coaching, is I'm trying to get into that place where everybody, because the point about flow is it's available to everybody. You were born to flow, in the words of a friend of mine who wrote a book by that name. You weren't born to be an asshole. And Christ, the world needs that. And we're so, kind of with the revisionary tendencies of the far right in the States, clawing back human rights and putting in place, the power going to fewer and fewer people. The IT bros kind of congregating around the asshole Trump. And it's they know exactly what they're doing because they're getting their license to continue doing the dangerous stuff they're doing unregulated out of that. And it's dangerous. It's not that there isn't good stuff there, but it's dangerous when it's unregulated. So we need that human beings should be more of themselves, not less of themselves. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to say all that. Bit of a rant, but it's
rants welcome on the show. But it's because you care about it, right?
Passionately. I mean, I don't do anything passionately. I sound passionately, but no, with total belief.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't it interesting? I was listening to the sociology researcher Brené Brown has a newish book that I've been listening to, and she was talking a little bit. It's kind of a coda to the book, really, about AI, because I guess the large language models were all just happening as she was really exploding. And she uses this, she says the words when she spent, I don't know, a few weeks or a month really intensely using them as part of a project she was working on with her team. And the phrase she used at the end was hollowed out. That was the best phrase she could think of for how it felt.
That's very clever.
To have been in the world of those things for that long. And if we think about that on the one hand, and then how, I would guess, but I'm not sure, certainly in education in the UK, the emphasis space for flow is getting downgraded every time they cut music, every time they cut theatre, every time they cut dance, every time they, deprioritize any of these things. Luckily, sport seems to mostly still be there, as far as I can tell from what I hear. Although, caveat, my kids are little, so I'll find out as they get older how things really are. But I mean, it's we're not taught to write poetry, and when we're taught poetry, we're not taught that it's about this magical connection between hibernation and the ancient Roman name for Ireland appearing from nowhere through your fingers. Hi everybody, just a quick thing before we get back to the show. If you like what you're hearing on this episode, the chances are you'll love An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, a free ebook available at thecoachesjourney.com. It's the most important piece of content I've ever created for coaches, boiling down everything I've learned from this show, from working with master coaches and from my own experience into one simple model. The model not only tells you the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, but also shows you how they can form a virtuous circle that keeps your coaching business growing. It's all free, and you can find it at thecoachesjourney.com. There's a link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Yeah. And even I take what you said about these activities that are being curtailed. And I think you're completely right. And then you said about sport. I've done some work in the world of sport, and a lot of coaches are terrified of the notion of flow. They'll approach it intellectually, but they want to be in control, and it's horrifying that the unwillingness of so many coaches to let their charges express themselves. And I hope this is changing in the world of work, because I would be invited in to speak to some CEO of some corporation, and some of these guys are borderline sociopaths. Just so you know that I'm not just that there is a disproportionate number of people with sociological pathological tendencies in senior roles, and they see me come in, and they know instinctively that I'm what I'm about, and I'm dangerous to them, so I don't get any work. But I know that's changing. So I'm very careful about where I present and how I present, because I only want to work with the people who want to work with me, and that's when it's fun. But it's the world doesn't has not to date wanted people expressing themselves or being in flow. Genius is dangerous. We just want people to do their jobs. An HR director said that to one of my colleagues once. We don't need genius. We want people to do their jobs.
Yeah. And I think that is changing. And I think the company, it looks to me, but then what do I know? But it looks to me like that attitude will be heavily punished in the age of AI, if nothing else.
If it doesn't, it's hell in a handbag, isn't it?
Yeah.
There needs to be a countervailing tendency.
And I think that in the sessions, what's nice is you manage a thing really nicely, which is all these ideas are present, but I never felt like I was being preached to, which is a risk, I think, when people write fiction with a non-fiction kind of element to it, because there is a non-fiction element to it here, which is, and we could get to some of it, but which is, like we talked about it. We talked about it when you were on the show before. We talked about the catching experiment, and you in fact trailed it in the interview. You trailed the catching experiment. Go back and listen to it. Let's not describe it again. I think we've described it both times you've been on the show. Yeah. So we don't need a third one. Go back and listen to the old episode. But the catching experiment is in there, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, you managed that really well.
Well, the joy of a novel is, and somebody asked me once, why did you write fiction? And it took me a while to work it out, but it was something I kind of inferred earlier in this conversation, which is that it allows you to point to something and say, there's this thing over here, and it looks a little bit like this. So have a look and see what you take from it. I resisted. There were people who said, "No, Myles, you have to have at the end of each chapter have to have a summary of the messages." So it's like, no way. If I do not want that to get in the way of somebody having a good read. So I was really clear in the writing that what had to come first was the story. And the story had to be sufficiently compelling to take you. It's only a very small book, 8 or 9 chapters, 10 chapters, from beginning to end. And if it didn't do that, then I failed. So yeah, and then interwoven is this thread of some stuff that come from kind of my enabling genius model. Interwoven is that stuff on what good coaching looks like, but the word coaching is never once used in the entire book.
Yeah, which presumably was deliberate.
Oh yeah. Because it's a misunderstood and degraded term now, unfortunately. So yes, it points to things, it infers things, and it allows people to take whatever they want from it, and that was the plan.
It's obviously got your experience in it. In fact, I wrote down earlier, I think that, like you said, your client said how they don't know how mad I really am. I think our friend Padraig says that at some point.
He does, yes.
Right?
It was the starting point for the book. Yeah.
So some of these ideas, they're clearly inspired by conversations with clients. I guess how actively were you doing that versus how much were those things just emerging as they emerged?
There was an element of planning, which was that in order to drive the story, I had to match up some of the messages with the flow of the narrative, and there were some things that I really did want to touch. So yeah, there was a kind of a matrix diagram that says, this is the part of the hero's journey it relates to. This is what Padraig does or what happens to him. This is the primary kind of enabling genius type message that I want to get across at this point. And weaving them together was a planning exercise.
Yeah. One of the reasons I got interested in how much of it was kind of how directly you were drawing on experience with clients is there's this great thing you said, or one of the characters says, I was so annoyed that I had to do something. I think this is right at the start. Maybe after Padraig has thrown his bag into the river. Spoiler alert for everyone who's listening. It's like the first thing that happens, so don't worry, it's not really a spoiler. I was so annoyed that I had to do something. Otherwise, I would have damaged something or someone. Do you know where that came from? And I'll tell you why I'm interested in a sec. Is it something you remember somebody saying to you, or did it just come out of you?
So it came out of me, and I suspect it relates to moments of frustration in my own life. So there's an inevitability in that there are bits of me in Padraig, and his mentor, who never gets described in any way. His clothing is occasionally described because he dresses rather well, and he's just referred to as the man. And there are elements of me in the man as the mentor and guide. But I think I've had that experience sometimes when things haven't, business stuff in particular hasn't gone according to plan.
Yeah, the reason it's interesting to me is because I've been doing some work recently, really trying to inhabit and understand the people that I do my best work with, the coaching clients that I do my best work with.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of language, now this isn't from them, this came from me as I tried to describe them. Now it's a little different. It's like subtly different. But basically what I got to was they've got to the point where they know they have to do something, because if they don't, something or someone is going to break, and it might be them. And so it's that same sense of, and that is the catalyst. Yeah. I'd love it if more of my clients showed up when they were in pure creation, happy mode. But the truth is, when they come, it's when there's a sense that they've suddenly got this impending sense, something's out of balance in this world that I'm living in, and I need to change it or it's going to break. And so maybe that's because that's always the amount of tension that's required for things to change. And you were just speaking to the truth of that. But I love that echo.
I think you put your finger on something so important. I mean, one of the things that in the enabling genius model, one of the pillars, if you like, is the notion of identity, which gets dressed up for practical purposes as people having unique individual genius, where genius is the embodiment of your potential. So you have that genius, and the point about it is that your job is to understand what that genius is. And it can be, you can have a major genius which might stay with you all your life, as me as a kind of facilitator and enabler or whatever. And then it might show up in my writing or in my coaching or whatever else, which would be a minor one, a minor genius. But you need to understand who you are, and that changes. And the guy I referred to working in the management consultancy, who's been compliant and very successful, he's shed that skin and he's becoming something else, and it's bloody joyous. But I think you're right. Very often, there comes a point where it's no longer sustainable to remain what you have been. And I think that much of mental health and for some, in certain kinds of ways, and particularly in the professions and in business, comes from that's no longer a sustainable way of being. And I need to metamorphose, transform. And so I think you put yourself on something that's, and unquestionably one of the times when I do my best work is when somebody comes to me, and they're often coming just before it comes to the boil.
Yeah, I had a client who it was very interesting. It's probably some of the most intense coaching I've ever done. It initially came, leader of a, I guess, medium-sized, small company in the grand scheme of things, but still hundreds of people, essentially for personal well-being in the midst of leadership challenges. But we ended up coaching through like a very traumatic transition of leadership in his organization. And so, yeah, exactly like you say, sometimes people just sense it. They sense they need the support in that moment, or the universe, depends on what you believe, right? Or the universe provides the man in the pub at the perfect moment.
Yeah, if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah. And it could be, I love the way you said that. It's no longer sustainable to remain what you have been. That's we've been talking about the hero's journey a little, and we talked about it plenty on this show, but for people who don't know it, it's this I guess this kind of storytelling framework, although that doesn't really do it justice, created by a mythologist called Joseph Campbell. And what Campbell would say, there's the part in it where people refuse the call to adventure.
Yes.
And then they cross the threshold, at which point there's no going back, right? And that's the first time you sat down and started writing the sessions, right? At that point, once you've had the idea, there's no going back. It's just a question of how long this journey is going to take. But I think that is the hero's journey underneath. The reason it's a pattern that existed in all corners of the world is because it's a story of human transformation.
Yeah.
And
very nice. Yes.
And so that moment is very familiar, right? From all our stories, the moment when they can't go back, right? It's not sustainable. This is funny. I've been watching the Hunger Games movies recently because I wanted something to totally switch off.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever seen those.
No,
they're actually fantastic. And in the Hunger Games story, it's a young woman, and it's a kind of post-apocalyptic world, and she lives on the outside of it, and she does all right for herself because she knows how to hunt. And then her younger sister gets chosen for this. It's a long story, but she gets chosen for this thing where she'll be killed.
Oh dear.
And at this point, it's no longer sustainable for Katniss to stay who she was. And so she volunteers to take her sister's place, and which ends with the overthrowing of the empire that is holding the whole thing, holding the whole world back. So you get these moments like that, which the Hunger Games fans are just like going, yeah that is exactly like that, Robbie. Yeah, and that's what my coaching clients are going through. Yeah. But I think it is a crucial part of this, and but I like the way that you're one, and I know that feeling of course I know the feeling as a human as well, but that quote that I pulled out, "Be so annoyed that I'll do some damage." It's got that echo to it as well.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on a coaching exercise that's in the book, which you once did with me, and that I never had a chance to ask what the origin of it was. So it's this beautiful exercise where you invite somebody to remember essentially themselves in flow, or themselves expressing their unique genius, and then to replace themselves in the image they've created of them expressing their genius with another image. And here we are, right in what we were talking about before, right? Metaphor, poetry, prose. Try and describe what you're doing when you're at your unique genius. That is a really hard task. This, if you can let yourself do it, and you, when you were presenting it to me, when you were coaching me, said something fantastic like, you might not want this image to be what it is, or something like that, but let yourself do it. And Padraig's one is beautiful. It's the sun rising over Dublin Bay, which, even though I don't remember what Dublin Bay looks like, I have been there once. We can kind of get that from the outside, and the man helps him get into it. Yeah, tell me about that exercise and what it holds for you, or where it came from, and what it means.
So yeah, so clearly I've mentioned Tim Galway once or twice, and that was kind of a starting point for me, and a kind of a core kernel of
yeah. And if people are interested, we talk about Galway loads in the other interviews, so go back and listen to those to get the full story.
And then another person came my way later on, which is Roberto Assagioli, now long gone, who was the father of psychology called psychosynthesis, and his very humanistic, but what he developed, him and the people who came after him, and you can still find many people in that discipline, psychosynthesis, was a whole raft of different ways of using the human, using your human being and all the resources. So he spoke about, I think he called them channels or functions. I can't remember which, but he said there are 6. There's rational, and then I think the next one was feeling, and the feeling comes in 2 ways, so separated into 2. One is kind of the emotional, and the other is the sensory. Then another one was desire, another one was intuition, and another one was imagination. And his point was, he drew them as a kind of a star, and his point was that one might give you access to the other. So we overemphasize the rational in a lot of what we do, and forget about kind of the intuition and the imagination, for instance, or our feeling states. So very often when I'm coaching, I'll get people to distinguish those things out, because they're stuck in their head about something. Whoa, what are you feeling right now? And I don't do feelings. Yeah, what do you feel? Or what does your intuition say? They don't know how to answer that question, but they try. So so it comes from Assagioli, and that visualization exercise is a kind of a version of that I have kind of made my own. And that idea that you use the imagination you take that image of yourself as a leader, say, and you allow that to evaporate and to be replaced by a symbol of you at your best, your genius as a leader, your unique individual genius as a leader. And it's incredibly powerful for most people. They get something they never thought they would get. I mean, yeah, they're doing that, of course, in a pub in Dublin, and there are 2 guys from the country who are saying, "Is your man all right?"
Yeah. By the way, listen, I'm going to come back to the exercise in a sec, but while we're talking about it, I love how evocative it is of Dublin. Obviously, it makes me want to be in all of those pubs. There's a kind of like one of my friends over the weekend having a pint of Guinness, and I got to say, I was like hypnotized by it in a way that I often am, but not wouldn't have been without having just read the sessions. And of course, what we haven't really said, but the title of the book is a pun, right? Between coaching sessions and sessions of drinking Guinness.
Yes.
But yeah, and I guess because we have got an audience of coaches, and often these specific tips are incredibly powerful. I mean, Myles, Myles has given you, listener, we've given you briefly between you a description of this exercise, and you could take that and try it with a client. And I just want to say from my side that what Myles says is true. It is a connection to a different part of me when it comes to purpose that is very meaningful. I can't remember. Is it probably 2 years since we had that conversation, maybe 3.
At least, yeah.
And what came for me was this shining holy sword, right? Which, as you joked at the time, yeah, talk about myths of this land, right? But it is, I would guess if any of my clients were listening, a couple of them would be going, "Oh yeah, that is what it's like," which is not always fun to be on the end of my coaching at its absolute best, right? Because there's a sharpness to it, and it can be wielded, but it is a very different thing to getting, I don't know, a Gallup Strengths Finder report, which tells me that I'm good at these things, right? Like, and not that that's a bad thing, and that was very useful for me at a certain
Yeah.
stage of my development.
Yes, absolutely.
But if I'm thinking, how do I deploy, like you say, if I've been given this body and this place on this planet at this time, and how do I deploy that? That image of me, and in this case, replacing the symbol in a garden where I was running a workshop with this symbol of replacing myself with this symbol of the shining holy sword. That is a really different. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the duty and responsibility.
Then you got to use it, right?
Yeah,
you got to use it.
that's
And
the hard bit.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like it's hard to say this because I'm British and all that kind of thing, but I do think if I can connect in with that holy sword energy in the moment, I do think we have a duty to use those gifts. And everyone who's pretending they don't is in for a rude awakening later in their life or right at the end of it when they realize they haven't been doing it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
There's a really nice dedication in the front of the sessions, which is for Joe, the love of my life. And you told me a little story about so far the sessions is only out in ebook. Audiobook will be coming out any day now as you're listening. Physical versions later in the year, but as I understand it, there's only one physical version of the book at the moment.
True.
Well, like you could say no, but would you mind sharing the story of that and why it was created?
So I have the great joy of being married to Joe. We've been together since 1987, 88, something like that. And she's kind of watched me go out in the world and do all this stuff and kind of pretends not to understand it, but of course understand it intimately and profoundly, but will maintain the pretense to as long as we've got together. So she kind of, and it's been a standing joke since I started writing the book in 1995, and kind of every now and again would start again and then fail, and then as Stan Wawrinka would say, fail better. Wawrinka being a tennis player of some ability, and then to eventually get it done, and I thought it was always going to be dedicated to Joe. It was her birthday in November, and I thought, okay, this is it. I got permission from my publisher. I live up in rural Norfolk. Went into my local town, Diss, and there was a lovely little copy shop. And I said, "Can you make this into a book?" So they kind of, yeah, sure. I think it cost me about £100. The most expensive copy ever. And yeah, it has just, it looks completely like it should. And then on the back it says, "This is a sole and unique copy printed for Joe Downey on my birthday." And I picked it up and I just wept. It was quite a moment. And it was lovely to give it to her. She's never read anything. And that's what really pisses me off. My wife, Jo, has never read anything I've written except this. And my daughter has all my books. And every now and again, I check them to see if the covers of, the back has been broken, and they haven't. And I met somebody the other day he's actually just been ennobled in a particular part of Europe, resident, and he's done great things civically, and an ex-McKinsey consultant, and senior, massive impact. And his children haven't no interest in what he's done and and he's done. I mean, you don't get ennobled for being an idiot, you know. So it's very funny that not one squeak about that. That all these books. No, I'll ask her one day when she's calmed down. But yes, it was a very, very, very special thing to do. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And I guess I hear in it what an odyssey this book has been, but also what an interesting part of human life. It's moving to me to hear about it as well. Part of it's the kind of the human experience, really, that there are people in our lives that will never really get it, never really know, mostly what we're working on or what we're doing. We don't know it of them in lots of parts of their lives.
True.
But I get this sense that, yeah, one of the things you can do by making something like this is you let some more people in. And I imagine that's part of your hope for the book in a kind of more strategic sense, that it makes your work accessible to a whole bunch of different people, or it becomes a thing that it's a bit easier to give to your leader than say, you should read this book about how to coach people, you idiot, as you might say.
Yeah.
But I just heard it from a deeper place then, that actually, and you obviously believe in this work, and you talked before about this belief in humanity, and your work is very much, as far as I can tell, about enabling that, about releasing that. And this book is a really beautiful way that you're doing that.
Yeah. I hope so.
Myles, is there anything about the book that we haven't talked about that you would really like to?
Oh, we've done it, but there's something that's come back to me in the last few minutes, which I mentioned. Dr. Mark, my clinical psychologist, who's been so helpful, who just happens to be a Dubliner, which means we connect in a way that has been entertaining. And he said something the other day, and he said, "Yeah, Myles," he said, "what you do is you help people navigate life and make a difference." And I thought, that's so easy to say. It's an unbelievably powerful set of words, and it's quite easy to say. And when we take it to the place where we've gone with it today, what that actually means in terms of, you used the word purpose earlier. I use the notion of expressing oneself and trust in self, and the resources that we're born with. And it's like, that's one big deal. That's one really big deal. And if we can help people do that just a little bit better, 1 or 2% better, the sum of human joy that can accrue in the face of the travesties of AI. Not that AI doesn't have a place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful because it connects to the duty and responsibility to express ourselves, and what it's like when it's no longer sustainable to remain what you've been. And I just get that sense. Yeah, there's been a little challenge in this conversation.
Yeah,
I guess because I guess maybe let's like, I'm looking forward to finding out when the book has been out longer and you've had more of that feedback and all that kind of thing. But I guess there's a in Padraig's story, it will. I imagine it'll provide that to people, provide that sense of, okay, yeah, it's not what I'm going through here, what I'm putting myself through. It's not sustainable anymore.
Yeah.
Navigating and make a difference. Yeah. Oh, he's good, your guy. Your psychologist.
Yeah. Telling me.
Myles, tell me what, like, you're working on the book. What else have you got what else are you excited about? Is it this? Sorry, I was thinking you're working on publishing this book, but also is the next book what you're working on? What are you excited about, or what's your direction of travel?
Well, the direction of travel for me is really about being trying to slightly unhook myself from the coaching space. Not that I won't do it anymore. Of course I will. That's my, my core skill. But to be in a bigger space that includes speaking to people about leadership, but also, wherever we can get people to talk about navigating life and making a difference. So there's all of that. So there is, I'm talking with my publisher about a book, which would be, the kind of working title is The Inner Game of Leadership. So, Tim wrote the Inner Game series, blah, 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 blah. And the thing about The Inner Game of Tennis, his first book, was that it's kind of about tennis, but it's not. So The Inner Game of Leadership will be kind of about leadership, but not. It'll be about what it takes to express oneself and have that kind of configured around the notion of leadership. So that's if I can work out how to do that, that's really exciting. Sessions, I hope, goes well, because I know what happens next time round, where Padraig will again get to the place where it's unsustainable and he needs to change. And that will precipitate a crisis where he has to go and see Dr. Mark. And then I'm also the other project, which is we're creating an AI coach, which is intended to replicate the effective coaching model, and to be as effective as somebody who'd been trained in my previous business, the School of Coaching, which was to a very high standard, and who had probably 3 or 4 years experience on top of that. So that's what we're shooting at, and I've just been reviewing some of the product right now, and we're getting damn close. I just looked at one through yesterday evening, and I would have passed somebody out of the School of Coaching on the basis of what that AI coach does. So we're training an AI bot, a number of them, to do coaching. And it's there's a beautiful inversion in it, because the intention amongst the people who are doing this is, I'm an advisor and a partner, rather there are other people driving it. But it's kind of like, if AI is in danger of hollowing out humanity, then we're subverting AI to refill that vacuum and to help people do what you and I do, which is navigate life and make things happen.
Yeah. I was going to, basically, you just answered the exact question I was going to ask. And because given the conversations we've had about AI in this conversation, it's interesting to be thinking about that. And I mean, these tools aren't going anywhere.
No.
And all we can do, I think, is learn to use them faster than we did with social media, for example, so that whole generations of children and young people aren't scarred by it. And I like that idea. I'm glad that you are consciously subverting it. That makes me feel excited for it. That sounds like Myles as well.
Yeah. Yes, Irish rebel.
Yeah. Myles, it's been such a pleasure, as it was to read the sessions, and as it always is to speak to you.
Oh, you've been a star. Thank you. It's been a joy.
Thanks for being a guest so many times over the years. And yeah, we'll speak again sometime soon, I'm sure.
More to do.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Myles.
Bye.
Hi everybody, Robbie here again, and just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of this episode. I'm imagining that means you think the work we're doing is important and valuable. We think so too. If you love this episode, I want to tell you about two other things I think you'll love. The first is my free ebook, An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, which you can get at thecoachesjourney.com. It's my attempt to boil everything I've learned from my years supporting, coaching, and interviewing coaches about their businesses into one simple model containing the fundamentals of any sustainable coaching business. The only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, and the things that if you don't do them, you can't have a sustainable coaching business. Get it for free at thecoachesjourney.com. And also, you can work with me as a coach. I love my work with coaches, and you can find out more about my group coaching for coaches at thecoachesjourney.com, or reach out to me directly via robbieswale.com to speak to me about one-to-one coaching. Thanks so much to everyone who's supported The Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alex Whitten, Alan Bedding, Christina Matai, Helen Gamble, Jessica Jem, and Nikki Marsden, Rachel Crawford, and Rebecca Nosko for your ongoing support. Thank you too for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on The Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.